My sister laughed as she rolled away with my office chair, but minutes later her voice was shaky in a voicemail. I simply asked, "Did you enjoy Section 7?" when I called back. My father soon announced his decision, and the conference room grew quiet. The board members were seated around the long mahogany table. Lauren sat beside my father, looking pleased, while I stood at the front reviewing my quarterly report. "Suspended," I repeated, making sure I understood correctly. "Until you apologize to your sister for undermining her authority," Dad clarified, using the firm tone he relied on when he believed the discussion was finished. 10 days without pay should give you time to reflect on appropriate workplace conduct. Lauren adjusted the expensive blazer she purchased using her corporate card and tried to appear offended. It might have seemed convincing if I hadn't spent 28 years understanding her expressions. Behind the fake hurt, she was clearly pleased. The situation began 5 days earlier. Lauren, our head of customer relations, had promised a major client that we could deliver a custom software product within 4 weeks. The realistic timeline was closer to 12 weeks, something she would have known had she consulted me or anyone in the development department, which I'd led for 6 years. I emailed the client with the accurate schedule, copying both my father as CEO and Lauren out of courtesy. It was straightforward, professional, and necessary to avoid legal trouble from failing to meet her unrealistic commitment. Lauren stormed into my office accusing me of sabotage, and now, as usual, Dad took her side. "All right," I said. My simple response surprised everyone in the room. Dad seemed prepared for a lengthy argument, clearly having spent the morning rehearsing comments about family unity and respecting the chain of command. "That's it?" Lauren asked, barely hiding her shock. "You're not going to challenge this? You want me suspended? Then I'm suspended. You want an apology? You'll have one." I calmly gathered my presentation materials. "Anything else? Or may I go clean out my desk for the next 10 days? Dad looked unsettled by how cooperative I was. "Well, we expect you back on the 18th, ready to move forward." I nodded and left, ignoring Lauren's satisfied grin and the board members shifting uncomfortably after witnessing a family dispute take place during a planned business meeting. For 6 years, my office had been my refuge. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Portland. My Harvard degrees and the awards earned by my development team lined the walls. One shelf held photos of my staff, celebrating launch milestones. Another displayed prototypes of every project I'd guided from start to finish. I had built something meaningful here. Under my leadership, the development department tripled in size, and our division's revenue increased by 300%. I recruited strong talent, created efficient systems that other companies later adopted, and shaped a workplace culture employees were excited to join. My father founded Sterling Tech Solutions 35 years ago, growing it from a 2-person startup into a company with 250 employees and clients across North America. He poured years of long workdays into it, giving up personal time and relationships. Eventually, he began handing more control to Lauren, who brought average ideas paired with exceptional ability to influence him. Family dynamics had always been complicated. Lauren, the eldest, competed for Dad's attention our whole lives. My achievements were either dismissed or minimized. Making the honor roll became something expected, not celebrated. Her engagement announcement overshadowed my acceptance to Harvard the following week. Mom used to try to create balance and remind me that my accomplishments mattered. She passed away from a sudden stroke 6 years ago, 3 months after I joined the company. Without her steady presence, Dad's favoritism toward Lauren only intensified. I began packing my belongings carefully. I wrapped my degrees first, then my awards, each representing late nights, problem-solving, and milestones that had shaped my career. Daniel, my second-in-command, texted me. "What just happened? Lauren's telling people you're suspended." I wrote back, "Taking some personal time. You're in charge." It seemed unrealistic to him until I added, "Trust your instincts." More messages came in from my team, but I silenced my phone and continued packing. With each item I wrapped, I felt like I was letting go of a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The ongoing need to justify my decisions, the exhaustion of having to reestablish my expertise to people intent on questioning it, and the disappointment of watching my father prioritize Lauren's ego over the company's well-being. All of it had accumulated into a burden I had accepted for too long. Emily from my team sent multiple messages asking if everything was okay. Ryan, one of my top developers, wanted to know if this was really happening. People from other departments also reached out, confused by Lauren's cheerful claim that I had been handled appropriately. Rumors always moved quickly, but watching them unfold so fast made me recognize something I had overlooked. Everyone already understood Lauren's shortcomings, how she took credit for others' work, made commitments she didn't understand, and left my team scrambling to cover her mistakes. They were aware of Dad's bias, even if no one openly discussed it. Then my phone rang. Aunt Carol. She was the only family member besides Mom who had ever fully recognized the dynamic. She had tried to stay close to both me and Lauren after Mom died, but it had become harder over time. "Hey, Aunt Carol," I answered. "Your father just called," she said immediately. "He wanted me to talk some sense into you. He seems to think you're having some kind of breakdown." I told him suspending you for doing your job was probably the worst decision he's made in 35 years. I couldn't help smiling. How did he respond? Exactly as you'd expect. He hung up on me. She paused. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" "Honestly, I think I'm better than I've been in years. Is that strange?" "Not at all. I watched you chase his approval your entire childhood. I watched him minimize every success you had while overlooking every mistake Lauren made. Your mother and I talked about it constantly. She worried about both of you for always trying to measure up, and Lauren for never being required to." Her words hit me more deeply than I expected. "Mom never mentioned any of that," I said. "She didn't want you choosing between acknowledging the problem and trying to maintain a relationship with your father. She hoped he'd realize it on his own." Carol's voice softened. "She'd be proud of you for stepping. She always believed you were stronger than you knew." We talked for another 20 minutes. Carol shared conversations she'd had with Mom, details I'd never heard. Mom had apparently kept a journal for years, documenting the favoritism between Lauren and me. She had planned to confront Dad eventually, but the stroke came first. "Do you still have Mom's journals?" I asked. "Yes," Carol replied. "She asked me to keep them. She said one day you might need proof that you weren't imagining things." She hesitated. "Do you want them?" "Yeah, I think I do." After the call, I sat in my nearly empty office, thinking about all the years Mom quietly tried to protect me, recognizing the imbalance, seeing the impact it had on me, and trying to offset it by supporting me when Dad wouldn't. Losing her had removed the only buffer between me and the full extent of Dad's favoritism. The past 6 years had grown progressively more challenging, with each new incident feeling heavier because there was no one left to validate my perspective. I packed a framed photo of my team from last year's holiday party. The world's "Okay Boss" mug they gave me as a joke went into a box. I found a card from 2 years earlier when we met a nearly impossible deadline. Inside were messages thanking me for shielding them from unreasonable demands and advocating for the resources they needed. "You never throw us under the bus." Ryan wrote. "Even when it would be easier," Daniel added. "Best boss I've ever had. You actually listen." Reading their notes while my office sat empty made me realize I had built something Dad never understood. Respect creates loyalty, not hierarchy. My team trusted me because I consistently prioritized their success. Real professional relationships come from competence and support, not favoritism or office politics. Lauren had the title, the corner office, and Dad's unwavering confidence. What she lacked was credibility with the people who actually kept the company running. By late afternoon, the room was bare. 6 years of work fit into 4 boxes and a rolling cart. I expected anger or sadness, but instead, I felt a surprising calm. A lifetime of being undervalued eventually teaches you to stop chasing approval from those who refuse to give it. I had waited 28 years for Dad to acknowledge my effort, recognize my work ethic, or even express pride. It was clear none of that was ever going to happen. I opened my laptop and started a new document. I had mentally drafted my resignation letter many times, but writing it only took 20 minutes. It was direct and professional, thanked the company for the opportunity, and provided the required 10 days notice effective immediately. Then I opened a new email addressed to all board members, department heads, and several major clients. Subject: Development Department Documentation and Project Status. I had always been thorough with documentation. Every project had detailed timelines, resource assessments, budgets, and technical specifications. Every team meeting included notes. Every decision had written justification. I also kept records of every promise Lauren made without consulting development, every unrealistic deadline she set, and every budget she spent on unnecessary items while expecting my team to work with fewer resources. Everything was factual, no personal commentary, just dates, emails, and data. Compiling the email took 2 hours. I attached spreadsheets comparing development revenue to other departments, project timelines showing the difference between my projected dates and Lauren's promised ones, and budget reports showing resource distribution. I also included the email thread from the situation that led to my suspension, along with 5 similar incidents from the past year. One file was especially revealing. 8 months ago, Lauren promised a client a 6-week delivery. Development estimated 16 weeks. Dad sided with her, insisting we meet her deadline. We finished in 14 weeks only because my team worked 60-hour weeks, and I personally paid out of pocket for overtime to keep us within budget, even taking a salary reduction myself. The client was satisfied. Lauren claimed credit. My team was the only group aware of what it took to meet that timeline. I paused with my finger above the send button. This would end any chance of fixing things with my father. It would also destroy any remaining relationship with Lauren. Everything I had built here would turn into an example of poor leadership and the risks of mixing family with business. I clicked send. Then I sent a second email to the recruiting firm I had spoken with 3 months earlier when I first considered leaving. If you want, I can also create. He had reached out to me about a position leading the technology division at a competing firm, but I politely declined at the time because of family loyalty. It's interesting how quickly loyalty fades when it only goes one way. Hello, Rachel. I'm ready to revisit the opportunity we discussed in August. If the role is still available, I can start right away. The third email was addressed to a lawyer I consulted last year about details in my contract. Paul, I need to review the non-compete clause in my employment agreement. Can we meet tomorrow morning? I already knew exactly what the clause said. I wrote it myself during the company's legal restructuring 4 years ago. It restricted me from joining direct competitors for 16 months, but the definition of competitor was narrow enough that I still had plenty of options. My contract also contained terms I specifically negotiated that others didn't have, including full vesting of my stock options regardless of tenure and a severance package triggered under certain conditions. Suspension without cause was one of them. By 6 o'clock, my office was empty and my car was packed. I took one last look at the space I had worked in and then walked out without turning back. The home I bought 3 years ago was in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from the office. Modest by executive standards, but fully mine. Paid for with money I earned, not inherited. The mortgage was manageable. The garden was peaceful, and the neighbors were friendly but not intrusive. I brought the boxes inside, poured a large glass of wine, and sat on the couch with my laptop. Replies to my documentation email were already coming in. The first was from Michael Brooks, the company's lead attorney. Call me immediately. The second was from board member Thomas Reed. We need to discuss this information. Can you come in tomorrow? 3 clients forwarded my message to their account managers asking about project timelines. 2 of them specifically raised concerns about commitments Lauren had made. Daniel from development wrote, "Holy, is this real? Everyone's panicking." I didn't respond to anyone. Instead, I opened a better bottle of wine and ordered Thai food, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. My phone rang 47 times that evening. Dad called 12 times. Lauren called 8. Michael Brooks called every 30 minutes, consistently. I let all of them go to voicemail. The messages became increasingly tense. Dad's first voicemail was angry, demanding a return call and accusing me of being unprofessional. His second was confused, asking what I thought I was achieving. His third sounded almost pleading, saying we needed to talk logically. Lauren's messages escalated into accusations. She claimed I was trying to hurt the company, acting jealous, and betraying the family. Her last voicemail was tearful, insisting I was destroying everything Dad built. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent 6 years helping Dad build the company, while Lauren spent the same period leaning on his reputation and creating problems for others to fix. Michael Brooks's tone was more controlled, but clearly urgent. The legal implications of the documents I had shared appeared to be sinking in, and he wanted to discuss my intentions. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Morning arrived with continued silence from me and increasing chaos from everyone else. The calls shifted to texts, emails, and even a visit from my father's secretary, who came to my house asking me to contact the office. I replied with a single group text to Dad, Lauren, and Michael. Rachel from the recruiting firm called at 7:30. I'll be in at 9 o'clock to gather my remaining items and submit the formal paperwork. No discussion is necessary. The position is still available, and after reviewing your portfolio, They want to expedite the interview process. Can you meet the CEO this afternoon? Absolutely. Paul, my lawyer, was the second call. Your non-compete is even narrower than I recalled. You have options. Come by at 11 o'clock and we'll go over strategy. No problem. I dressed carefully for the office, choosing a navy suit that conveyed confidence without aggression. Professional, composed, and prepared to close this chapter properly. The parking lot was more crowded than usual at 8:30 a.m. Word had clearly spread, and people were curious about what would happen next. I walked through the lobby with my head held high, carrying a leather portfolio containing my resignation letter and several documents Paul prepared after I messaged him last night. The executive floor was busy. Assistants gathered quietly, talking among themselves. Department heads stood near their doors, looking uneasy. Everyone seemed to be anticipating a major conflict. My former office door was open. Lauren was sitting at my desk, looking through drawers I had already cleared. When I approached, she looked up, her expression shifting from irritation to anger. "You had no right to send that email," she said, standing so quickly that my old chair fell over. "You made me look incompetent in front of everyone." "The documentation is clear," I replied calmly, without stepping inside. "I only provided updates on project timelines and resource allocation. If that reflects poorly on you, the issue might not be my email." Her face turned red. "Dad is going to fire you for this. You've ruined any chance of coming back." "I'm not coming back," I said, lifting my portfolio slightly. "I'm here to make it official." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Dad appeared, with Michael Brooks following closely behind. Dad looked like he had aged 5 years overnight. Exhausted, his suit wrinkled in ways I had never seen. "My office. Now," he ordered, turning without waiting. "Actually, the conference room would be more appropriate," Michael said carefully. "This has moved beyond family issues." The same conference room where I had been suspended the previous day now carried a completely different atmosphere. The board members weren't present, but Michael had brought a paralegal who set up a laptop to record the meeting. "Before we begin," Michael said cautiously, "I need to clarify that this meeting is being documented according to company policy for employment matters." Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but Michael's steady look stopped him. "My father may run the company, but experienced executives rely on their legal counsel in situations like this," I said, sliding my resignation letter across the table. "I'm resigning effective immediately. As stated in Section 7 of my contract, suspension without documented cause activates the severance clause. I'm also exercising my stock options per Section 12, which allows immediate vesting if I leave voluntarily following disciplinary action deemed inappropriate by external counsel." Dad had clearly read the contract and recognized the exact sections I referenced. "You included those terms yourself during the restructuring," he said slowly, realizing the implications. "I did. At the time, you called me paranoid for adding them. Turns out, I was simply prepared." Lauren had followed us to the conference room and now stood at the doorway. "This is blackmail," she said. "You're trying to extort the company." "Exercising contractual rights isn't extortion," Michael replied calmly. "These provisions were negotiated in good faith 4 years ago, and the company agreed to them." "How much?" Dad asked, his voice flat, the tone he used when evaluating losses. "The severance package totals 5 months' salary. The stock options are valued at around $400,000 based on yesterday's valuation." I kept my tone steady and professional. "I'll also need my complete personnel file, all documentation for projects I led, and written references from the 3 board members who oversaw the development initiatives." And if we refuse, Lauren asked tightly, then I refer you to Section 19, which outlines the dispute resolution process. It requires arbitration, expensive, time-consuming, and public. Dad held my gaze. I'd prefer to handle this professionally, I added. You violated multiple policies related to information sharing. Actually, Michael interrupted. The material she shared consisted of internal project updates only. Nothing confidential, nothing proprietary, and nothing that breaches her contract or company policy. I reviewed every item. It's accurate reporting of project status and business decisions. The paralegal continued typing quietly, documenting every exchange. Why? Dad finally asked. For the first time. He sounded tired rather than angry. Why would you risk everything like this? You suspended me for doing my job, I said. You supported Lauren when she made commitments she couldn't fulfill, and you blamed me for being honest about realistic timelines. I kept my tone steady, refusing to let emotion disrupt what needed to be said. Yesterday wasn't the first time, Dad. They had reached out to me about a position leading the technology division at a competing firm, but I politely declined because of my commitment to the family business. It's remarkable how quickly loyalty disappears when it only moves one way. Hello, Rachel. I'm ready to revisit the opportunity we discussed in August. If the position is still available, I can start immediately. The third email was to a lawyer I consulted last year regarding contract details. Paul, I need to review the non-compete clause in my employment agreement. Can we meet tomorrow morning? I already knew the specifics of that clause. I helped draft it during the company's legal restructuring 4 years ago. It restricted me from joining direct competitors for 16 months, but the definition of direct competitor was narrow enough that I still had plenty of alternatives. My contract also had terms I insisted on, which other employees didn't receive, like full vesting of my stock, options regardless of tenure, and a severance package triggered under certain situations. Being suspended without cause qualified. By 6 o'clock, my office was empty and my car was loaded. I took a final glance at the workspace that had been mine, then left without looking back. The home I purchased 3 years earlier was in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes away. It was modest for someone at my level, but it belonged to me, paid for with money I earned. Not inheritance. The mortgage was manageable, the garden was peaceful, and the neighbors were friendly without being intrusive. I carried the boxes inside, poured myself a large glass of wine, and sat on the couch with my laptop. Replies to my documentation email were already coming in. The first was from Michael Brooks, the company's lead attorney. Call me immediately, wrote board member Thomas Reed. We need to discuss this. Can you come in tomorrow? 3 clients forwarded my email to their account managers asking about project timelines. 2 specifically voiced concerns about the promises Lauren had made. Daniel from development wrote, "Holy, is this real? Everyone is panicking." I answered none of them. Instead, I opened a better bottle of wine and ordered Thai food, feeling lighter than I had in years. The phone rang 47 times that night. My father called 12 times. Lauren called 8. Michael Brooks called every 30 minutes like clockwork. I let all of them go to voicemail. The messages grew more frantic. My father's first voicemail was angry, demanding I call him back and accusing me of behaving unprofessionally. His second was confused, asking what I thought I was achieving. His third was almost pleading, saying we needed to talk calmly. Lauren's voicemails became hostile. She accused me of trying to damage the company, of being jealous and disloyal. Her last message was full of tears, claiming I was destroying everything Dad had built. The irony was hard to ignore. I had spent 6 years helping my father build the company. Lauren had spent the same 6 years relying on his reputation and making errors others had to fix. Michael Brooks was more measured, but clearly urgent. The legal implications of the documents I had shared were becoming obvious, and he wanted to discuss my intentions. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Morning arrived with silence from me and continued turmoil from everyone else. The calls expanded into texts, emails, and even a visit from my father's secretary, who asked me to contact the office. I responded with one group text to Dad, Lauren, and Michael. Rachel from the recruitment firm called at 7:30. I'll be in at 9 to collect my remaining belongings and submit the final paperwork. No discussion is needed. The position is still open, and after reviewing your portfolio, they want to fast-track the interview process. Can you meet the CEO this afternoon? Absolutely. Paul, my attorney, made the second call. Your non-compete is narrower than I remembered. You have several options. Come by at 11 o'clock and we'll go through strategy. No problem. I dressed intentionally that morning, a navy suit that projected confidence without aggression. Professional, calm, and ready to close this chapter properly. The parking lot was more crowded than usual at 8:30 a.m. Apparently, news had spread and people wanted to witness whatever happened next. I walked through the lobby with my head high, carrying a leather portfolio containing my resignation letter and other documents Paul prepared after I contacted him the night before. The executive floor was tense. Assistants gathered quietly in corners. Department heads stood near their doors. Everyone seemed to be bracing for some dramatic confrontation. My former office door was open, and I could see Lauren sitting at my desk, going through the drawers I had already cleared. When I approached, she looked up, her expression shifting from irritation to anger. "You had no right to send that email," she said, standing abruptly enough that my old chair rolled backward. "You made me look incompetent in front of everyone." "The documentation speaks for itself," I replied calmly, without entering the office. I simply provided updates on project schedules and resource allocation. If that makes you appear incompetent, then perhaps the issue isn't the email. Her face flushed red. "Dad's going to fire you for this. You've ruined any chance of returning." "I'm not coming back," I said, lifting my portfolio. "I'm here to make that official." Footsteps echoed down the hallway. My father appeared, with Michael Brooks close behind. He looked as though he had aged 5 years overnight, his face drawn, his suit wrinkled in ways I had never seen before. "My office. Now," he said, turning without waiting. "Actually, the conference room is more suitable," Michael replied gently. "This is no longer just a family issue." The same conference room where I was suspended the day before now felt entirely different. The board wasn't present, but Michael had brought a paralegal who set up a laptop to record the meeting. "Before we begin," Michael said carefully, "I need to state that this discussion is being recorded according to company policy for employment matters." My father looked like he wanted to argue, but Michael's expression stopped him. My father may have run the company, but experienced executives listen to their lawyers when ... legal risks are involved. I slid the letter across the table. "I am resigning effective immediately. Under Section 7 of my employment contract, suspension without documented cause activates the severance clause. I am also exercising my stock options under Section 12, which allows immediate vesting if I leave voluntarily following disciplinary action deemed improper by outside counsel. My father's expression shifted. He clearly remembered the contract terms. "You wrote those provisions during the restructuring," he said slowly, realization settling in. "I did. You called me overly cautious at the time. Turns out, I was simply prepared." Lauren had followed us and now stood in the doorway. "This is blackmail. You're trying to extort the company." "Exercising contractual rights is not extortion," Michael replied calmly. "These were legally negotiated terms, and the company agreed to them." "How much?" my father asked, his voice flat, the same tone he used when calculating financial losses. "The severance is 5 months' salary. The stock options are currently worth about $400,000 based on yesterday's valuation." My voice remained steady. "I will also need my complete personnel file, documentation of all projects I led, and references from the 3 board members who oversaw the Development Oversight Committee." "And if we refuse?" Lauren demanded, her hands clenched. "Then I refer you to Section 19, which outlines the dispute resolution process. It requires arbitration, expensive, time-consuming, and very public." My father looked at me for a long moment. "I would prefer to resolve this cleanly," I continued. "I already have another job lined up. I'm not trying to escalate this or cause further harm to the company." "Further harm?" he repeated, his voice rising. "You sent internal information to clients and board members. You damaged your sister's credibility. You violated multiple policies on information sharing." "Actually," Michael interjected, "the material she shared consisted of internal project updates. Nothing confidential, nothing proprietary, nothing that violates her contract or company policy. I reviewed everything. It was strictly factual reporting on timelines and resource decisions." The paralegal typed steadily, documenting every word. "Why?" my father finally asked, not angry this time, just exhausted. "Why would you do this? You suspended me for doing my job. You sided with Lauren when she made commitments she couldn't fulfill, and you blamed me for being honest about realistic timelines." I kept my voice even, refusing to let emotion creep in. "Yesterday wasn't the first time, Dad.